All right, if you tuned into last week's episode of On a Budget, we took you around and showed you some tips on how to grocery shop. This week, we're going to show you how to cook some of those food items that we picked up. So first off, we're going to go over to the oven and turn it on to 350 to get it preheating. So you always want to preheat your oven before you start cooking, so that way it's up to temp when you're ready to pop in whatever you're baking. Okay, first we're going to get some prep work done before we start cooking. Today we're going to show you how to make a really quick and easy meatloaf, baked potatoes, Brussels sprouts, and we're even going to make some pumpkin browned butter and sugar cinnamon rolls for you. So first I'm going to take, this is a pumpkin, a sugar pie pumpkin, and if you remember the decorating on a budget episode, we talked about you could purchase edible squashes and pumpkins and use them to decorate, and then at the end of the season you can eat them. And that's exactly what we did with this one. So this one was a decoration here at the office. You can see he's starting to be at the end of his life. He was really cute, but now we're going to make something tasty out of him. So I'm starting off cooking, cutting him up because he doesn't really have a ton of flavor. So we're starting off by prepping our pumpkin here because he doesn't really have a ton of flavor. And after him, we're going to do our onions and our Brussels sprouts, and those generally have a lot stronger of a flavor. So that way we won't have to keep rewashing our cutting board for us. So just trying to work a little bit smarter and not harder for us. So we're going to take our sugar pie pumpkin here, and we're just going to carefully cut him in half. And then of course, have all of his little seeds in there. So we're just going to scoop those out with a spoon then. So we're just going to empty out all of his little guts and his seeds. And you, of course, can save these seeds, and you can make roasted pumpkin seeds out of them to eat as a snack. Or if you're someone who does like to garden, or you have somewhere where you could grow something, you could save them and grow sugar pie pumpkins next year. So then after you've hollowed out your pumpkin halves, you're just going to place them face down with the cavity down onto a little baking sheet. And then we're going to pop that in the oven. The oven isn't quite preheated yet, but that's okay because these are going to slow roast. We don't really need a brown or a char on them. It's just to get them cooked down to get the puree out. Okay, so we're just going to pop these in the oven. We can put them on the top shelf, and then we'll have room for our meatloaf down below. Next, we're going to take our little onion and get him chopped up and get him ready to mix up our meatloaf. So one of the easiest ways to chop an onion is to just take off the root and the tip of them. Turn him on his side there, cut him in half. From there, you can peel off that outer layer. Sometimes this part can be a little tricky. And you can save these outer layers to make soup stock, which we'll show you in a future episode. You can actually save a lot of these scraps, and that's a good way to save money when cooking, is to try to use as much of the food that you purchased as possible. So those pumpkin seeds could be made into an edible snack. These onions you could make soup out of. You can do all kinds of things. From there, if you take your onion halves and you just slice them into slivers. And then if you cut down the width way, you just get little dices. All right, once you have your onions chopped, you can just toss that to your bowl. Next, we're gonna prep our breadcrumbs. So instead of purchasing breadcrumbs, that can be quite expensive because you're just buying old stale bread essentially. You can purchase really cheap bread that's about to go stale or is stale at the supermarket and make your own. So that's what we're gonna do here. And we probably won't need all of this bread, so you could always save some of this and make really good garlic toast to go with your meal, which I think we're due today. So I'm just gonna take a chunk off here, I'd say about 1/3 of the loaf, and I can put the rest of that back in here. And then if you can cut your chunk in half, and we're just going to try to mill this up as best we can to get some breadcrumbs out of it. Now this actually, we bought this last week to make our episode of grocery shopping on a budget. If you have older bread that you would like to preserve for longer that you're going to use in a recipe, you can actually put your bread in the freezer. And so this spent a week in the freezer and it got thawed out and it's actually still quite soft, and you could eat this right now and it'd still be pretty fresh. So if you just want to make tiny slivers out of it and then just go across and make little pieces of breadcrumbs. So then we're going to add our breadcrumbs to our bowl with our onions. And then from there, I have 2 eggs here. We're going to add that in to emulsify. And then we have our ground beef that we got on sale last week. This sat in the freezer for a week and then we let it thaw for about 36 hours so that way it was ready to make for the meatloaf today. Buying meat on sale or a lot of goods on sale that you can freeze is a great way to save on grocery costs. By locking in prices that are really good and freezing those items, you can make them last for a while and get really good food. So once we have our onions and our breadcrumbs and our meat in the bowl, we can start adding some spices. Here I have some garlic salt. A good way to save on spices is if you get blends and mixes that have multiples inside, you won't have to go out and buy every individual spice if you don't want. Of course, if you have it in the budget, it's nice to have some basic spices on hand because they can just really add to a lot of flavor to any meal. So this is garlic salt with a little bit of parsley. So I'm not going to add a ton of salt because, of course, this is in here. And then we have some paprika. Paprika is an awesome spice to add to any types of burgers or like things that you want to have more of like a barbecue flavor. Of course, you can get crazier with these spices if your means allow you. Sometimes spices can get expensive, but you can spice it up however you like. So we're going to put a good bit of paprika in there. I have some onion powder to add a little more onion flavor. And then of course some black pepper. And this is just a basic meatloaf. You can get real wild with this if you have extra ingredients. You could always add some ground vegetables if you have that are left over that you want to use up, or if you want to sneak them in for the kids to get something healthy. or even for yourself because you won't be able to taste it as much. From there then, you're going to use your hands. You can of course make sure they're washed prior, or you could wear gloves of course. And we're just going to mix up our meatloaf. The egg and the breadcrumb in there will help emulsify and mix up the meatloaf, as well as extend the life of the meat. Meatloafs have always been a cheap and easy American staple dinner that housewives and families have been making for years. So once you have your mixture all combined, you can transfer it into a loaf pan. I would like to point out that you generally would make these onions a little finer of a dice. My knife was not sharp enough to allow me to get a nice fine dice on them. So you're just going to form that into your loaf pan. Press it down into the edges. And then no meatloaf would be complete without a little tangy barbecue style sauce over top. So I'm just going to take about 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, however much you like. I'm going to put a little bit more paprika in there. And then I'm going to take some tomato ketchup. Put probably a quarter to half a cup. Majority of the sauce is ketchup. And then some yellow mustard. Probably like a teaspoon. And then I'll finish it off with some Worcestershire sauce. And then just mix to combine. And then we're just ladle that across. And then once your meatloaf is prepared, we're going to toss it in the oven. Then we're going to bake our meatloaf for about 35 to 45 minutes. It's always good to temperature check it or cut through it and make sure that it's cooked all the way through. So we're going to check on the sugar pie pumpkins to see how they're coming along. They look really good. They're starting to caramelize, as you can see. You can see a sticky liquid over there. We want that. That's going to make them very sweet. And then we're just going to check them by taking a fork or a knife. And if it's very easy to puncture it, which it is, it means that they're done. So we're just going to take those out and set them on top of the stove, and we're just going to let them cool. For the potatoes, we're going to first wash them, of course, to make sure that they're nice and clean. And then a little trick that I have is we're going to put them in the microwave. Okay, we're going to toss them in the microwave for a few minutes, and this is a little trick I have. If you're going to make diced roasted potatoes, that will make your cutting very easy and will cut down your cooking time. So these are a little bit damp from washing, which is fine and actually quite perfect to microwave them. I'm just going to put them on a paper towel and put them in the microwave for a few minutes. I'm going to start off with 3. So then after you microwaved your potatoes, of course it's going to help them be a little softer, and it's just going to help whenever you go to cut through them, as well as cut down on that cooking time. Do be careful though when you get them out, because they are going to be pretty warm, so you might want to give them a few minutes to cool off before you handle them. We're just gonna cut them into large chunks, large dices. And I have here this is a 1/4 cup of melted butter. You can add some olive oil to this to cut down on the butter so it'll be a little cheaper and a little healthier. And of course you can increase or decrease the amount of fat or oil that you're using in this recipe depending on how many potatoes you have here. I have 5 small to medium sized, so a 1/4 cup I think will be fine. So after you diced up all your microwave potatoes and you have them in your bowl with your butter and preferably olive oil, you can add some seasonings, and something that's great to season potatoes with, roasted potatoes, is parsley and garlic. So this is some fresh parsley that we actually grow here at Tableland that I'm going to use today. You can use dried parsley if you have it. Or you could purchase some at the store. Parsley is one of the cheapest herbs to usually buy. It's usually about 98 cents for a bushel that's about this size or a little bit big. We won't need all of this today, but this is a good size, and parsley is a great herb to have on hand. So I'm going to take a few sprigs here, and I'm actually going to gently remove some of the leaves from these stems. You, of course, can eat the stems, but they're usually a little tougher and harder to chew if you get a big mouthful of them. So I'm just going to chop those up. So after you have a nice fine dice on your fresh parsley, or if you have minced that's dried, you can just toss that in to your potatoes. And then we're going to add some garlic. If you have fresh garlic, that would be most ideal, or if you have jarred minced garlic, or if you have dried, that'll work as well. And you can be pretty liberal with this because the only two main flavors that you have in these potatoes will be garlic and parsley. Then you can toss in a little bit of pepper, and then if your garlic doesn't have salt in it, or if it does, you can add a little bit of salt. Potatoes do take a lot of fat and salt to season because they are majority starch, so they do require a lot of seasoning to get them to taste good. From there, you can just mix them up. You can use a spoon or just your hands, and then we're going to put those on a sheet tray. So if you have a nice cookie or baking sheet here, just toss those on your tray. Something to spice these up even more, if you have on hand, is if you have any Parmesan cheese. They taste really good with garlic and parsley potatoes. These are some Brussels sprouts that we got on sale. They are clearanced, and we tossed them in the freezer and then thawed them out today. And they actually seem pretty fresh still. That's, again, a benefit of buying something that's on sale or clearanced and being able to use it in the future. So we're just going to take these Brussels sprouts and we're just going to cut them in half to make them a little smaller so it's easier to roast them. So our meatloaf is done. We're going to pull it out, and of course if you have a thermometer, it's good to check. And if you don't, you could always slice a little chunk in there and just look in and see if it's done. You can put your potatoes on the bottom rack of the oven, and that's going to help them crisp up so you have real nice and crispy roasted potatoes. After you chop up your Brussels sprouts, you can add a little olive oil to them. If you have garlic, if you want to make them garlic sprouts, you could always add some balsamic vinegar and honey. That's a really good combination. Or maybe you have bacon. That goes really well on them as well. We're just going to do something really simple with some oil. There's a little bit of garlic salt in here. We're going to do mostly regular salt and some black pepper. And then you can mix those up. And you're gonna put those on a sheet pan just like we did for the potatoes. So next we're going to make some, we're going to start on the pumpkin browned butter cinnamon rolls. So the key point for a browned butter cinnamon roll is to brown your butter. So this is a really quick and easy step that you can really add some warm nutty flavors to your baked goods. You're going to take about a half a stick of butter or a quarter cup of butter and put it in a small saucepan. And then you're going to get your cooktop to about medium to medium high. You don't want it to be too high or you're going to burn your butter. And so it's going to melt down and you're going to continuously stir it until you see some nice brown toasted color. And then the butter will actually start to separate.
Action.
So once you get your butter melted all the way down, it's going to start to froth like this. You want to be careful that you don't have the heat up too high, that you burn the butter solids. The idea here is that we're going to actually kind of separate the butter solids from the butter fat, and we're going to toast or brown them, hence making browned butter. I'm going to turn this down a bit because it's getting a little too boily. And then you just want to make sure you're stirring this continuously so it's not sitting in any spots in the pot, otherwise you might burn it. And we don't want burned butter, we want browned butter. If you burn some of your milk solids, you're going to have to start over because it's going to be very bitter as opposed to toasty flavored. So we're going to keep this going. I'm going to turn it down a little bit more because it's moving right along here. And if you were in person right now, or if you do this yourself, you're going to start to smell the browned flavor in there. You can really smell it, but you want to take it until you see that color. As it goes, it's going to froth more and more. That's perfectly normal and good. Just make sure you're continuously moving it. So as you can see, the butter is starting to change color here. And instead of being like a bright buttercup yellow, it's turning more golden and darker. That's what we want there. You can see that these milk solids are starting to separate, the butter solids, and those are toasting. And that's what's going to give us really good flavor. So we're going to take that, we're going to keep it going. If you only want a little bit of a toasty kind of caramel flavor in there, you don't have to toast this as long, but I really want that brown butter to shine through in the filling for our cinnamon rolls. So that's looking pretty good there. I'm going to give it a few more seconds on the stove. Okay, that looks good. And then you're going to want to immediately remove it from the heat. So you're just going to add your browned butter. You can see all those nice fat and milk solids in there. We're going to add that to our bowl. You can hear that it's sizzling. We're going to want to let that cool a bit before we add the rest of our filling. So after you have your brown butter and it's cooled a little bit, it doesn't have to be completely cold, but just so that way it's not sizzling anymore, you're going to take one of your sugar pie pumpkin halves, if you have those, or you could use regular pumpkin puree that you get in a can. This, of course, was cheaper, and it's going to taste really good. But you're going to scoop out the insides of that puree, and you're going to add about a quarter cup to a half cup into your bowl. We actually won't need this whole pumpkin, and so with the other half and what's left of this, you could make all kinds of things. You could make a small batch of pumpkin soup. You could add it to heavy cream and sugar and blend it up, and you could have pumpkin spice creamer to put in your coffee. The possibilities are really endless, and you can use this a lot of different ways. You can just keep So we're going to mix that in with our butter. And then we're going to add some brown sugar to our mixture. You can use as much or as little brown sugar as you would like for the sweetness, but you do want to make sure that you're not using too much that it starts to dry out the mixture, because we are going to put these inside our cinnamon rolls. So I used about a 1/4 cup there. I'm going to mix it around and see how it looks, and then add more if it's necessary. So that's looking pretty wet, so I might add a little bit more. Probably another 1/4 cup, so about a 1/2 cup total. These, of course, are cinnamon rolls, so we do want them to be quite sweet. And then once you get a good consistency that you like, you can add a little bit of cinnamon. And then you can add a little bit of pumpkin pie spice or seasoning. You want to be just add a little bit there because, of course, it already has some cinnamon and some warming spices in there. If you don't have pumpkin pie seasoning, you can just use the cinnamon. You could add a little bit of nutmeg that's in pumpkin pie spice, allspice, clove if you like that better, ginger. Anything that's a warm spice is really going to shine through in these. So once you make your filling, I'm actually just going to use some Pillsbury cinnamon rolls to speed the process up and to make it easier. You, of course, can make your own sweetbread at home. That takes a little bit more time and culinary skill. So if you're new in the kitchen, using this is going to be a lot easier for you and also a bit faster. So we're just gonna unroll that and pop these open. If you bang it on the side, it's a little trick to help pop that seal because sometimes they can be very stubborn. And then we're going to use the icing that they provided. So we're just going to put that off to the side. And so, of course, these cinnamon rolls already come with some cinnamon filling in them. But in my experience, they're usually not very sweet. And as you can see, there's not a lot in there. So then when you go to eat them, they're not as tasty as they could be. So what we are going to do is to add a little bit of our filling to this to just amp them up a bit. So if you want to take some of yours, we made a little extra because we had a lot of pumpkin. You, of course, could make 2 batches of this, or you could use this in another recipe. This would also be really good to put with oatmeal and make like a baked oatmeal for something that's a little healthier that you could make for your kids for breakfast or before you go to work for your breakfast or anything like that. But we're going to take a few spoonfuls and put it right in the center, and we're going to spread that around. We're going to make them extra gooey because everyone likes a real gooey cinnamon roll. Okay. And then we're going to roll the dough right back up. So you're going to roll up that filling back in there. And then you're going to turn it on its side, and as you can see, since we added more, it's going to ooze out a little bit, but that's fine. And then preferably, you're going to get a sharp knife. This knife isn't as sharp as I would like it to be, but that's what I have to use today. And then you're just going to cut along the edges. They actually do give you little serrations if you saw. They can be a little hard to tell because the dough goes over itself, but you're just going to cut those into little spirals. Just like that. So once you have them all cut, you're just gonna shape them if they got a little smushed, and preferably you'd have a smaller baking sheet or whatever size to however many batches you're making. You of course could fit a few batches in something this size, but you're just going to arrange them together so that way when they bake they're puff up. And then to make them extra gooey, you can always add a little bit more of that filling over top as they bake. So then you're going to pop those in your oven, and then you're going to set a timer for 10 to 12 minutes and just keep an eye on them. Once they're puffed, you're going to take them out of the oven. So we're going to check on our Brussels sprouts here, and they are looking really good. I think that's good enough. If you want to take them a little farther, you can, but they're starting to get crispy edges on them and caramelize, which is what we want. You can see over here. And we're just gonna sit those on top next to our potatoes, which also got really crispy. You can see some browned bits over here, and that's what we want because that's gonna give really good caramelization and give us a lot of flavor. And so there you have it, guys. A really cheap and easy meal of meatloaf, potatoes, and Brussels sprouts. And then I used the leftover bread to make some garlic bread and dessert. I hope you guys found this helpful and enjoyable, and we'll see you next time on a Budget.